All right, Alex, quick question for you is,
Yeah.
initially, what really got you into the drag racing scene?
So grew up in the automotive world. My dad built all kinds of different cars, tons and tons of cars, did fiberglass, but there's a lot of show cars
Okay.
and street rod type stuff. But then he started not transitioning, but started getting back into drag racing with nostalgia drag racing, gassers and stuff. And what really sparked my interest with drag racing was when he traded one of his Willys that he had built, a custom car, for the car that was the 2007 Drag Week, Hot Rod Magazine Drag Week winning car.
Okay.
First 7-second street car of that event. So it was a pretty special car for what the drag and drive world was. And that wasn't a world at the time, it was a freak show actually. And labeled as a race. And he raced that and I fell in love with that car. They ended up selling it, and when I was 15, we started building my car that was my version of that car, and then it's just been a snowball effect from there. So
Very cool, very cool. So you're obviously big into the drag and drive scene, and popularity-wise, that just keeps growing and growing and growing. What kind of challenges have you faced to meet the demands of that, going track to track and, not only just driving there, but oftentimes a trailer behind it, things like that. Talk a little about that.
So as I said, drag and drive didn't used to be a term. You didn't have drag and drive, you had drag week. There was one event a year, and then sometime around 2016, 17, 18-ish, they came out with Rocky Mountain Race Week. So then there was a couple different drag and drives. So for a long time, this wasn't a thing. You go talk to the companies and tell them what you're doing at PRI or SEMA or whatever, and it's like, what is that? So people didn't know about it. So there wasn't a lot of information out there on how people were doing it, what it took to do it. And so it was a lot of trial and error. And Dad and I talk all the time because this will be my 11th year, coming up on like 20 drag and drive, something like that. 11th year racing with that kind of racing. And we talk about all the time, like if we had to go back and figure out what we have figured out in that time, I don't know if we'd want to do it, like it's a lot.
Absolutely.
What you're doing it's a test of man and machine, it's an endurance, it's the ultimate test of the parts that are on the car, because not only are they having, for now, in our situation, having to be capable of 6-second, 200-mile-hour passes, but they also have to go to being on the street and taking the abuse of a trailer and potholes in the road and all that. And so a big part of that is finding over those years the compromises of this part may be a little heavier, but it survives the street, or this part is a compromise to that, or this part performs really well over here on the street side and we can compensate for it on the race. So it's finding that mix of the right combination of parts and maintenance schedules and putting it all together and then going out on these events.
Very cool, very cool. So obviously you've got mod shocks on the back of the 55.
Yep.
Time is very limited when you're at the track, right?
Absolutely.
So when you guys go to pack up and leave, are you making any changes to the shock, or are you just letting it rip as it goes down the road? Tell me a little about that.
So interestingly enough, we've had, as I mentioned, we've had mod series on a bunch of different project cars. We've had it on my 68 Camaro, which I originally started with, which was a radial tire car, leaf spring car, and now we have it on the 55, which is a 4-link big tire car. And two totally different worlds.
Yep.
So we've got to kind of play with them on both sides. With drag and drive, we don't have a lot of time at the track to, even though we should, it'd be super beneficial if we could, to change valving and to really play with suspension. We get to make some small adjustments here and there. We can talk about that. Yep. But for the most part, we get to do all those adjustments in testing. We usually, though, test with a track that's in the same conditions that a big tire should be on, a slick should be on.
Yep.
We're actually starting to experience a new situation now where we're racing at drag and drives where it's more of a radial prep track, and that is varying day to day to day what those conditions are. So I say all that to say, previously what we've been doing is testing, finding a setting that's a compromise for on track and street. But now we're starting to come into this new track situation where we're starting to have to, visit making those adjustments to those as we find those different conditions daily. But something that we've been able to do previously that's been really cool is we find that setting, we pretty much, for the most part, leave it alone for most of the race. We run that same setting on the street and on the track. We find a spring that's a compromise between what's best on the track,
Sure.
what's best on the street, because it has to go from working and getting it down the track for a 6-second pass to carrying the weight of a trailer. So
Absolutely, and that's one of the cool things with this shock is if you want to cross that bridge into tuning it for the track and then your commute to the next destination, you can do that, simply jack up the car. You've got all your adjustability right there with a simple flathead screwdriver and your fingertips. You can make those changes, but it's also cool to hear that this shock, as it's raced, is still suitable to go down the road.
100%.
Looking for that. And so, you mentioned the big tire thing, a big slick, and you may be on a track that's super tacky and more geared towards like a radial application, and you guys are hitting the track and that tire wrinkles, and it's going to carry down and you're staying wrinkled, and that's where some of that adjustability we might find can help you a lot, say with that low speed rebound adjustment. Once we make that fast, quick shock shaft impact off the line, then we can control our low speed to kind of alleviate that symptom as we're getting our weight transfer back towards the nose off the line. So super, super cool to hear that.
I think we're starting to move into that, not that we haven't looked at it previously, but we're really starting to be in a situation where to remain competitive in the conditions that we're going to be racing in, rather than making an excuse of the track is like this. You can only do so much, but rather than making that excuse in the sense of it's just going to be a lot of figuring out how we overcome that. And I think it's going to come down to a lot of that. And the cool part is, we're not having to carry multiple shocks with us and bodies. We carry with us little box of our different valves, and I have an expectation that we might be visiting those more frequently coming up.
Very cool. Very cool. Yeah, and then one other thing I just wanted to touch on, just kind of a fun way to end the conversation, is through your career so far. Obviously you're young, but you've got a lot of years of experience so far. You've made a 6-second pass, you've done 200 plus. Are there any other moments so far that really stick out as a highlight for your career?
Unfortunately, I have forgot more moments than I remember. And I don't say that in a bad way, but I'm lucky to be able to say that I've got to experience so many things. But it's the 55, the Camaro, racing the Camaro that I had, 68 Camaro, 8-second car. It had a lot of different first accomplishments, the first race, winning the first race, my first pass down the drag strip, things like that. There's stuff that lives there. But the 55, and since we've built that, and just as a dad and I've been able to progress that program and really evolve it and turn it into a program rather than just a car that we're racing, that's probably as an overarching very cool moment to see, taking something that now requires a maintenance schedule and figuring stuff out, and it's really pushing the limits of we're trying this and we see it working. So of course there's moments where it's we won, we hit this goal, we did that, but there's a lot of just overarching, it's just being okay, we had this big goal, we set out, now these are things that we're getting to meet with it. And it's hard to remember some of those very small moments off the top of my head, but plenty in there, and it's a neat thing to get to be doing. So yeah.
Very cool. Well, Alex, we really appreciate you stopping by today and taking the time to talk with us. Look forward to many adventures in the future, a lot more memories to be made, and best of luck to you.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.